Okay, let's see. Looks like the video is working, and let me know if the audio is coming through okay. Can everybody hear me already? I at least get some green dots. It looks like we're live.
It's working.
All right, seems to be working. Great, let's begin. So hi, welcome to SAHCon 2020. Be sure to check out the Discord for all sorts of conversations, music, panels, presentations. Homestuck fandom has a lot of awesome creative folks, and I'm happy to get to hang out with y'all today. So this panel is Remember Longcat Jane, a Detective Pony movie Q&A session. I'm Naked Bee. I'm a fan who's constantly dreaming how to turn my favorite fanfics into movies. Usually I just dream about it, but Homestuck was inspiring enough that now I've made 2 films, one based on Duckface's brilliantly absurdist play Theater of Cruelty, and the other based on Sonnetstuck's masterfully meta novel Detective Pony. So today I'll be talking about Detective Pony, both the making of the audiobook and the filming of the video adaptation. I'll start with a short story about how I got started on the project, and then I'll look to the chat to take some questions. This time I've got my partner Mr. B just off screen, and while I ramble on for this first bit, he'll be looking at the chat and passing along questions for me to answer as soon as I get done rambling. So if you have something you want to know about, go ahead and type it in, and we'll try to get to it before the end. So why Detective Pony? Well, I love it, and if you are coming to this panel, probably you do too. So exciting. So when I first read Detective Pony, I got to the end, and I said, wow. And it just immediately started right over at the beginning because I couldn't even handle how good it was. But at least a little bit of that was I had been reading it on Kindle, just the text-only version, and it blew my mind. It was amazing. And then on the second read-through, I got the images version on AO3, and it got even better. Like I had entirely missed the Apple ending bit the first time through because there'd been no image, and maybe there's an image description, but I didn't really get it. And it was a complete shock when I got to the little Apple Books page at the end on the second read through. So it somehow managed to just be mind-blowing twice, which was very cool. Also, in thinking about it, it seemed really impossible to make, and so that was intriguing. I have a lot of notes from like 2016 starting, well, I want to do something like Detective Pony, but that's clearly impossible. So what if I did XYZ instead? And then at some point, I had a breakthrough about the 2 voices, that's how I could represent the black and the orange text. And then it was really like months later that it occurred to me to also do the 2 layers of footage, like the Jean Betancourt footage and the Dirk footage. And so with those 2 concepts, that's what really unlocked the idea. And it feels obvious in hindsight, but at the time, I really had no idea what it would look like at the end when I was at the beginning going, well, it's impossible to film. Anyway, this movie had so much pre-planning. I think I said before, it's about 4 years from start to finish, and it was almost a year of just planning and taking notes and thinking about it before I actually started doing anything. Let's see, I think another thing I want to go over was the casting process. Obviously, voices, I cast myself as Jean Betancourt because that seemed easy. In casting Duckface, I mean, boy, did I luck out there. He's amazing. The short answer is I just asked him and he said yes. The longer version of this story is one that when I was reviewing last year's panel, I actually told already. So if you want to hear more on that, it starts at about the 19-minute mark in the behind the curtain Q&A video that I posted last year for SAHCon 2019. So I think that story's hilarious, but I won't tell it again. Okay, so now I'm going to look and see if there is a question I should answer or if I should just ramble some more.
What was the inspiration for the dolls format?
Oh, so I started using dolls for movies a while back. I had watched my first fandom, the first time I was interacting with other fans in a fanish context was Lord of the Rings in early 2000s. And so I was watching all of the DVD commentary on the Peter Jackson DVDs. And one bit that really struck me was he was planning out, I think it was the Battle of Helm's Deep, one of those battles, with a bunch of little army guys, and he had a camera that was swooping in and showing how they were going to film the CGI stuff. And I was like, oh, what a great and practical way to block your motion and your camera movement. So I had a bunch of Barbie dolls left over from a very fashion-obsessed childhood, and started using Barbie dolls to plot out the little movie projects I was doing at the time. And then like there were several movie projects where I was just using the dolls to figure out how I was going to move the actors later. And I would produce shooting scripts that were sort of like comic book novels, and just sort of point to the actors and be like, do the thing like the dolls are doing. And after years, actually, like 5 or 6 years of doing that process, that's when I read Theater of Cruelty and again envisioned it as a live action thing first, and had been planning like, how is we going to do this live action? How are we going to flood the stage? Blah, blah, blah. And then realized, oh, if I did it with Barbie dolls, that would be so much easier. And that was the first time I did a Barbie doll movie as a finished product rather than just as a step along the way. I liked how that came out. So I did the same with Detective Pony. Okay. More questions?
The movie adds a layer to the novel. What's the next layer?
That's a great question. I don't know. Video game, I think, somehow is probably feels like the next media thing. Maybe internet experience where it takes over your computer. Really boutique Detective Pony experiences where you are shipped something, and immediately when you start reading the book, a small girl and a horse come to your house and start talking in front of you. I think that would really be a luxury boutique experience. But yeah, I don't know, video game.
So this question is long, but I think the gist of it is the Detective Pony novel is basically authored by Dirk, even though he's fighting with Jean Betancourt.
Yeah.
It's got a flat structure. How did you think about keeping that flat structure with single Dirk author when making the video?
So I definitely separate. I'm not sure if this is an answer, but this is what I'm going to talk about. So in my head, I separated the video into 3 layers. So I had a good time imagining this Jean Betancourt who had a public access station, or possibly PBS, but that maybe seemed a little high budget, where she and a team of earnest individuals were making these doll kid movies. And then that, again, in headcanons that don't matter, Dave Strider was an uncredited intern on those productions, and that's why he was so obsessed with the Pony Pals movie series and stocked it in Dirk's, future seascape apocalypse house. So Dirk grew up watching all these videos. And then we have in the movie that Dirk created, so he's got the base layer, the Jean Betancourt videos. Then there's the narrative stuff that he films with the Dirk doll as a character, and the way that the Dirk doll interacts on that level is a layer. And then I did think about what the human Dirk as opposed to the doll Dirk, again, what kind of, what parts of the story are not the doll Dirk that we see on screen, but the puppeteer behind the screen. What is he doing and thinking? What limitations does he have? So I don't know if that answers your questions, but those are my thoughts about that there's a Jean Betancourt layer, a Dirk the doll layer, and then a Dirk the fictional character as we know him from Homestuck layer who's making this movie.
question about the Helmlock symbolism and the
Mm.
four beta kids' relationship to Detective Pony.
Yeah. So that's one of the parts that I'm really proud of because it came last. Like I think of that as the Hemlock Pharmacon rant right at the end, and it's all in the dollhouse, and that really was just a blank piece of paper for years. I would listen to the audiobook over and over again, and just think, well, what am I going to do here? I don't know, maybe some biblical things, maybe a slideshow of art, but I really had not too many ideas for a long time. And then my dad had been getting into building doll houses. He had been a woodworker and had needed to scale his hobby down due to life circumstances. And so he was building a bunch of doll houses and heard that I was working on this Detective Pony thing. And he's like, well, clearly you need a dollhouse in the movie. And I'm like, yeah, thanks, Dad. I don't know if I really do, but go ahead. And so he sent me this Barbie scale dollhouse. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, there are 4 rooms and an attic. This is the Homestuck house. So at first it was just going to be green, and we're going to do stuff in it. And then it's like, no, the beta kids fit in the 4 rooms of the Homestuck house. So, okay, great. Then, and this is a subtlety that I had a lot of fun thinking about, but I don't necessarily expect to come through right away, is that the references are not meant to be quite the beta kids, but the alpha guardians, right? So it's Pop John, and that's why there's a Night Court poster over the thing and the pipe. It's Grandma Harley in her room, and so there's some like patent plaques and some math stuff in the Skynet logo. It's not little girl Rose, it's Rose Lalonde, the author of Complacency of the Learned. And so that's where she's got the novelist shtick going on. And then the room that we don't spend any time on, the invisible Pharmakias room, is Dave, the director. And again, did any of this come through on screen? I don't know, but I had a great time thinking about Dirk's complicated relationship with post-scratch or alpha Dave as this famous film director that he really idolizes but doesn't know. And if in this AU or whatever, if Dirk has decided to make a movie, that's a very Dave thing to do, right? He's very consciously emulating his older brother. And so I just imagine he has a lot of feelings like, what would Dave think about this? Would Dave have liked this movie? Is this silly enough for him? I don't know. So again, I had a really great time thinking about all that. And then, of course, the attic ends up being where Hussy goes. And I laughed a lot when the other characters got to throw Hussy out of the attic. That was just sort of fun to do. Okay, I think that's my answer to that question.
What was the hardest thing about filming? Were there technical difficulties which changed the plan?
Oh, that's a good question. So the thing that comes to mind first about what the hardest thing about filming was just physically difficult. There was a lot of, had the table set up with the doll on it and the camera here. And so that meant that I had to sit or lie on the floor with my hand above my head, trying not to be in the shot. There were just 7 million shots that I would press go and be like, la, la, la. Oh, wait, you can see my elbow. You can see my head. The dolls fell off because the only position I had that worked, I couldn't look at them. Or I'm trying to read the script to know what motions they're supposed to do and just having trouble coordinating it all. So I'd actually say that the thing I was most surprised by was just the difficulty of the physical movements. And so whenever I've watched documentaries of like the Muppet Show or Jim Henson puppets, and you see these crazy contortions that people are doing, like, oh, I get it. It looked hard, but it's really hard. So that was sort of the surprising hard part. The part that was hard, but that I expected to be hard, was Detective Pony as a novel is really good. It's really dense. It makes a lot of allusions to classical philosophy and more modern philosophy, and I don't have any sort of background in that. And so I was constantly just running up against the limits of my knowledge and worried, is there a joke here that I don't get? Is there a joke here that I think I'm getting and I'm getting it wrong? And eventually, like I did some research. It was fun to read up on things. But for the most part, I decided to just let that go. You know, if someone is like, oh, she clearly didn't get what's going on there, well, that's fine. um, so, but I'm definitely really interested. Like, I think the part I struggled with the most was trying to read the Derrida stuff. I really tried to read that essay, and I'm still stuck on page 50 of a translated version. It's, yeah, I feel like I just don't have enough training to understand the words and what he is trying to say there. But I tried a little bit. One bit, right? Because as I was reading the essay, I was like, okay, how can I put more Derrida references in visually? And as I was reading through, I was like, well, I don't even know what he's saying. How can I put references in? But there was one part where he was talking about the purpose of a preface and how it's basically like those magic slate toys that, you draw something and then you lift it off and it's all erased, about the relationship between the preface and the body of a work. And that's honestly why the little ending stinger at the end of every episode is me drawing a bee and then erasing it to sort of, I don't know. He mentioned magic slate, so I bought a magic slate toy and worked it in. Okay, next question.
They ask about technical background in filming. Prepare you for things like the scrolling backdrop?
So I've been making amateur movies, I don't know, for a little while. 2001 was when I was on a hiking trip and talking to a friend, and I had just gone to a film festival, a gay and lesbian film festival, for the first time in 2000. And then a couple of weeks after, I was on this hiking trip. And as we were walking, I was like, what would be great if we did a movie? There need to be more queer movies. That would be fantastic. Probably we could do one as soon as we get home, like a month from now. It was not a month from now. It was years after that. And it's really hard to make a movie, as it turns out. But it's really fun to try. So, wow. So that means, 19 years of trying to make movies. But I would say that honestly, these these two Homestuck movies have been my most successful ones. Things like the scrolling backdrop, that was Mr. B. I said what I wanted was a physical thing that was like how they do in cartoons, where the mat moves behind them as the cartoon figures just sort of run in the center, like that Scooby-Doo hallway kind of thing. And surely we could just have like a tube of paper or fabric that rolls around on something. Maybe we'll put it on a motor, maybe we'll have a hand crank. And I just told Mr. B to make that for me. And so he did. He went to the hardware store, he came back with these two PVC pipes on spindles. And it ended up that we didn't need a mechanism. The friction of the fabric tube around the pipes was enough that you could just advance it. So I'm really proud of the scrolling backdrops, because I think that effect is hilarious. And it was easier to do than we thought, partly because I delegated that part. But even by report, it was easier for him to do than he thought it would be. And I'm really tickled by those kinds of low-tech physical simulations of things that are often done digitally. I think another part that really cracked me up was it took a long time to figure out how I was going to represent Pawnee. And I ended up using murals from the Parks and Rec TV show, the Pawnee, Indiana town murals, the horribly offensive racist murals. And so in the PBS version, Dirk is adding those digitally. And again, in my early notes, I just assumed that when Pawnee became a Dirk doll, that he would just continue adding the murals digitally. And then I had this amazing brainwave, but what if the mural is real? And so I really liked how that looked, to have printed the murals out on paper, cut them out, stick them to her forehead. And then again, when she has her consciousness revelation, to be able to show that visually by the mural falling off, and we see her face for the first time in the movie. Like I think there's just something about the surprise of effects which should be digital turning out to be practical that is really fun to play with.
People are curious about the CPR dummies and when they're going to be in a movie.
Yeah. So I put the CPR dummies in because this is also my work from home office. And so part of my work involves the CPR dummies. And I just wanted them to get some screen time. Also, I think they look funny in the background. But I like the idea about a CPR dummy movie. I will say they're even less posable than the Barbies. One of them doesn't even have a face, so it might be a challenge to convey emotion, but that's an interesting challenge. So thanks for the idea.
Let's see. Favorite part of Detective Pony or favorite bit of symbolism that you got to include?
So I think my favorite part of the novel is how warm it is, that the theme at the heart of it is sort of Dirk and Jane friendship, Dirk trying to be vulnerable and sort of, I just get the sense that he's feeling out as he goes, like how much of himself is he willing to put in it? How vulnerable is he willing to look? How much irony can he put on top so that maybe she won't notice? Like that genuine conflict between wanting to communicate and wanting to be known, but being scared and not wanting to do it. And maybe you just throw it all away before you post it, but then you don't. So I think that's what I like so much about it. Or at least that's why all of the cleverness and all of the illusions, since they're supporting that theme, I think that's why it hits so hard. For the video, for the longest time, chapter 10, chapter 11. Chapter 11 was my favorite. What I think of as where Jean Betancourt goes inside the book with Dirk, and there's just a bunch of costume changes in a row. That part was super fun to do. I mean, I got to play with the Barbie dolls and dress them up in different clothes, and every weekend I would make little sets for them to act in and arrange all the props. I mean, like that was literally just playtime and a fantastic excuse to play with the dolls. And then, but I go back and forth between that section in episode 11 versus the dollhouse bit in episode 10, because that was also super fun.
When are you going to do something with your own fan fiction?
Oh, well, then I'd have to write fan fiction, and I don't like to write. Pointing at the CPR dolls, I do a lot of nonfiction writing, reports, and so yeah, the last thing I want to do for fun is write. So for fan fiction, I think I'm just going to continue to steal other people's great ideas. I definitely think that somebody should write an amazing epic complacency of the learned wizardy Herbert something. Like as soon as that exists, let me know. But yeah, I think about getting into writing fan fiction, but I think my hobby is going to continue to be sort of the directing filmmaking thing. So I like fan vids, I like fan art, but fanfic I will leave to all of the other very clever fanfic writers.
Follow-up question. What about stuff outside of Homestuck? What are you interested in doing there?
Yeah. So I'll say fandom-wise, the fandom I'm in mostly right now is the Untamed, Chinese drama that had a live-action adaptation last year, which is so great. It's on Netflix and YouTube. You should watch The Untamed. It was originally an explicitly gay web novel, and has also been adapted into an animated version and a comic book version if those are more your speed. But I definitely recommend that. It's pretty great. But again, since it's a more mainstream commercial property, I'll probably just read fan fiction. I probably wouldn't make a movie out of it. Other things that might be next, I definitely expected to already have a next idea by now, right? I've got an idea folder that I'm constantly putting things into, and I spent at least a month convinced that the next project was going to be some sort of Dirk Jake as Socrates and Phaedrus in the Phaedrus. Made some notes about that, and then at the end was like, this isn't coming together. I'm not sure Plato is a good enough fanfic writer for me to bother filming it. But I also think just general, these weird pandemic times I'm mostly focused on other things right now. But life is long, and so I'm sure I will do something eventually. Oh, I remember. An idea that is probably not going to happen, but I will go ahead and put out into the universe so you guys can enjoy, is what I would really love to see is sort of a Rumble in the Pumpkin Patch, like live action wrestling event with maybe Duckface and Sonnetstuck in the ring. I think that'd be hilarious, but I really don't see how that's going to happen, but it would be funny. So yeah, no real plans. Surely something.
Let's see. There's a question about Dave being credited. I think craft services. There's confusion about props.
Right. So in traditional film credits, craft services means the people who cook the food. The catering service is called craft services. And so that was just a nod that all of the food that Dirk is eating while, before he goes into the game is stuff that Dave would have stocked for him. I mean, I guess maybe he catches fish and eats those too, but I was thinking of him just putting in a reference to Alpha Guardian Big Brother Dave as the person who provided all of his food.
There was some discussion in the chat about, can Detective Pony stand by itself? What would need to change in order to
file the serial numbers off,
or something like that? Yeah.
So because so few of the people I hang out with in real life are Homestuck fans, I've been showing them all Detective Pony and making them watch it and being like, well, there'll be some Homestuck references, but you'll probably get it anyway. And that does seem to be coming through pretty well. Most people like the Homestuck references that I think are pretty interesting and add another layer aren't necessary to understand, oh, there's a kid's story about a girl and a horse, and then there's this other random person who's interfering somehow. Oh, and he's the author. Oh, okay, and they're making meta-author jokes. Like the character of Dirk Strider works well enough as just an original author who comes in and starts messing up the pony story. I feel like the friendship with Jane, that it's a gift for Jane, that also gets lost. But again, people don't seem to mind if they don't have the context. So yeah, I actually think it would stand pretty well on its own. But one of the things I love about fan fiction so much is that they're just impossibly rich because they're built on other things. And I really appreciate stories which don't just rely on sort of a mainstream osmosis set of allusions to get. I like them when you can just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. A thing I'll talk about because I had a good time planning it was early on. I assigned each, when I realized that there were going to be 12 episodes or 12 chapters, it's like, well, there's 12 trolls, I should do something with that. So I assigned one troll to each episode, just based on if there was a word or a scene in an episode that reminded me of either the troll's personality or their horoscope symbol or maybe their god tier aspect. match them up. And so then whenever I had an arbitrary decision to make, especially early on when making those fabric backdrops for the PBS, I just needed to pick color schemes. And so for whatever reason, the first episode where we see the barn, that's Teresa's episode. And so it's like, well, I'll make it teal and red accents on the barn. It could have been anything. I think there's Equius is for some reason episode 2, and there's a bunch of locations introduced there, like the kitchen. And so that's why the kitchen is blue and has a picture of a horse in it. So it was just fun to have a reason to make those decisions. Maybe not super deep, but fun. Although I did end up at the end being like, did I really get any references to this troll into this episode? Maybe, maybe not. So that can be a fun scavenger hunt to try to figure out what the mapping is. But if you get too far and you end up with like 2 or 3 where you're like, I can't find a reference here, it may be because I didn't manage to get one in. But it was a good sort of randomness generator, a way to not just take my first impulse on what is the perfectly generic instance of this thing, but to pick specific colors or specific elements. I think the part where that came through the strongest was the Hell Forest. I think we spend the most time there in a chapter called Blood in the Snow. It was like, oh, blood, that's clearly Karkat. What does Karkat symbolize? All right, crabs, crab dad. Oh, right, the white crab dad claws sort of look like leaves, and that made the trees look a lot scarier, creepier than they would have if they'd just been regular tree branches.
Question about the cue ball bedroom scene. How did that happen? The cue ball sheets.
Oh, right. So there, when I was struggling with how to process the part of the story where it says there's a gray mist on the other side of the Lethe, and there's something visible, but you're not sure what it is. And at first, all my ideas had been very literal. There's a gray mist. Maybe we see heaven on the other side. Oh, what does heaven look like? I don't, like I had all those very sort of literal biblical reference or sort of Greek mythology reference ideas. And then at some point when I was figuring out like if Jean Betancourt had all these colorful set fabric backdrops, what backdrop would Dirk have? And I said that Dirk was lazy and he would always use a gray sheet, that every backdrop that Dirk had would be this gray sheet. And then it's like, oh, wait, it's a gray sheet. That's like a gray mist. And the edges of the sheet would always flutter around when I didn't want them to while I was filming. And so that was easy to be like, oh, but maybe that's an intentional thing I can do. I can play with. So Dirk is filming this in his Homestuck bedroom. Maybe the backdrop wavers, and what we're seeing is a glimpse into the bedroom behind the set. So then just looking at references, like what were the easiest ways to indicate we were in Dirk's room? And it was the cue ball sheets and the Rainbow Dash poster and the Spirit of the Horse poster. So the posters are just printed out, and the cue ball sheet, I found a website where you can print blankets and sent them, made that image, also made sure that I would get like a 413 cue ball all in a row, and made sure to position it so that it was, you can see the little 413 when that flash happens. And now I have an exciting throw blanket with cue balls on it, which I enjoy using. There's also definitely a part of coming up with ideas to put in the movies, so that there were things that I just wanted to make or have, and be like, well, if I put it in the movie, then then I really need to. It's not just frivolous.
Question about the Dirk monologue at the sea. How did it come about? How was it made?
Right. So that one had been a really affecting part of the book, right? It's really personal. I wanted a way to indicate that we had moved out of the silliness and the dolls, and we were now in Dirk the human character. And so at first I was like, well, we'll film something in the bedroom, you know, so it's clearly behind the scenes. And then I was just thinking about, I was like, well, okay, I don't look much like Dirk. Like, I didn't really want to do Dirk cosplay or have anything. I thought using a face would be too distracting, or to try to like lip sync up with Duckface's words. So just trying to think about abstract visual representations that would still somehow pull us into this third, more grounded, more real layer. And a few years before, at a film festival, I'd seen a movie called El Camino Real by Jenny Olsen, and it was really neat. It was pretended to be the history of the street and Spanish colonialization, but was actually just a long monologue about her girlfriend and how that relationship had gone. And so that was neat, but the format was something I'd never seen before in a feature film. And so it was an hour and a half of her talking, and then a series of like 30-second still shots of the street. There was just, well, look, it's this intersection. Occasionally a car drives past. There were no figures or people or movement of the camera at all. And then it would switch to another angle a couple of blocks away. And we would just watch that. And so what I remembered from the film is that there was just enough on screen to keep your attention, something to sort of, in the same way that, you know, like driving in a car, you've got something to look at, but it doesn't change very quickly, so you're mostly in your head. It was a really nice way to then listen to the monologue and listen to the personal story and have it feel like you were just sitting there listening to someone talk, but it wasn't just a black screen. So I wanted that feeling. So I was like, oh, okay, how do we do that? What does Dirk have access to? Well, he has access to the ocean and more ocean and maybe some seagulls. So the idea there was, I imagined him on his little apartment roof, looking out over the ocean. And so the ocean shots were easy to get, and the seagull shots, tried a couple times and then eventually found some very cooperative seagulls who would let me film them. The shot that was a little hard was the orange Converse, the feet hanging over the ocean, because I kept finding places where I could film my feet hanging over something, but it was really shallow and it looked really shallow. So I'm not sure how that shot came out, but that was the goal, the symbolism behind it. Okay.
How did you do the allusion research into the literature being referenced, etc.?
So the fantastic thing about Sonnetstuck's Detective Pony is the extensive bibliography at the end. I found that so useful. I had that bookmarked in a tab, open all the time, just going through and being like, wait, this is a reference to that. Let me read the Wikipedia article on that. Let me go and try to read the original, whatever it is. It was nice that he alluded to so many things that are old and classic, so it was easy to find copies of them. And it was just a fun, like I said, I spent a lot of time planning, and it was really fun to have this like directed course, to know that one of the things I needed to do was get familiar with all these references, at least at some level. But it's also true that I had a lot of like homework, this syllabus that I was going to read, and you know, I didn't read all of them, and I didn't read all of them right away. There were definitely some plans I had made, and then as I eventually got around to reading the thing it referenced, I was like, oh, that doesn't make any sense anymore. Oh, okay. But yeah, that was fun. So the bibliography was great. So on the YouTube videos, there's the video description. And if you click through that, I did try to do a thorough job of, whenever I used external video or external music or photos or something, to cite those references. So especially in some places where the references are really dense, like where Anna's eyes are flashing, I've linked to what all movies those are from, because I like putting a lot of densely layered symbolism in, but I also like being able to just find out what it is rather than have to have 10 years of film education before being able to, oh, I get that reference. Yeah. So they're just listed in the video descriptions, all of the references I added for video.
When you're not reading Homestuck and Derrida, what are you reading?
Fan fiction. Pretty much several hours a day of fan fiction. Yeah, like I said, Untamed right now, but definitely on Twitter and Tumblr and AO3, I have a lot of people I follow who I started following through various fandoms, and I'm pretty much a lemming. And as people who write things that I like move into other fandoms, I sort of say, oh, well, what is that thing over there? And fall into fandoms that way. Yeah, I really love fan fiction. I think it's one thing that I really love is the fandom trend of doing sort of write your own life AUs, whether that's a coffee shop or on a fishing research vessel. I really like that one. I like learning about other people and how they see the world with this shared reference of characters from fiction that we all know. For whatever reason, I feel like I should read like nonfiction bios and memoirs of people to find out about the world. But honestly, I find that sort of boring, and don't tend to gravitate towards that kind of work. But in fan fiction, when I see in the author's note that, well, this is based on my real experience as a barista, I'm like, I am there. I love those stories. And I think it's about having that extra layer of connection or familiarity with the fictional characters, or yeah, possibly just that fan fiction tends to be a more speculative universe. We're more interested in either romance narratives or hero narratives or adventure magic kind of stuff. And I like that in my fiction.
It's a question about the Beethoven music and how it gets increasingly strange as things go on.
Yes.
Discuss.
So that I did so long ago, because I did that all for the audiobook and didn't alter it a ton for the video. But I was really proud about that. Certainly before then, I hadn't done anything in GarageBand or with music, right? I mean, I was in marching band in high school because that's required when you grow up in Texas, that either you do high school football or marching band, it seems. So I did marching band. So I have basic musical education. But that started with, again, the Sonnetstuck's bibliography. The Pony Pals SOS is a section from Beethoven's Turkish March sheet music, and he links to a full page of sheet music. So I went to that sheet music and found the part in GarageBand where you can just type in note by note, because I certainly can't play 4 parts on the piano like that, or even at any speed, but I can type in painstakingly to GarageBand all of the notes. So that's the episode 1 theme, is just that typed in. And then I started playing with filters and instruments. I think instruments in GarageBand, there are 4 parts, and each one can have a different instrument. And then also moving things into Audacity, it can stretch things out, add reverb. When we go into what I think of as the hell forest, when we switch from PBS world to the Dirk world, the music is just reversed. And so it sounds like different music. But that was a fun trick. So I just played with ways to to just have that one melody, that one composition, and how many ways can I stretch and distort it. The really ominous sort of music that plays under the dollhouse pharmacon scene is, again, the Turkish March, just like slowed down 1,000%. And so it was fun to see what sort of effects could be produced pretty algorithmically, rather than having to compose new stuff all the time. So yeah, thank you for calling out the music. That was definitely a stretch for me capability-wise, and I think it came out okay. Sometimes people have asked if you can download the music, and yes. A few times on Tumblr, I think I posted a link. There's just a box download site, and you can download it in a folder if that's your jam.
So the person who made the DVD is in the chat, and one of the reasons they made it was because there were that YouTube would take down Detective Pony due to copyright concern. Do you have any concerns about that?
No, or at least not a super lot. So I'm really a big fan of AO3 and sort of the parent nonprofit, the OTW, the Organization for Transformative Works. I follow a lot of people who are involved in that and have been following the conversations they have about fair use and copyright. And so I think there's a really strong case for the Detective Pony video being fair use, especially in terms of Homestuck references, right? I don't think there's any way that someone would claim that work is not very transformative and it's non-commercial. And those are, at least in US copyright law, two of the big determinants of what counts as fair use versus what would be copyright infringing. And so if, say, Viz Media decided to get litigious, which maybe seems unlikely, but if they did, I would definitely just go to the OTW's legal department and say, help, YouTube has taken my videos down for a copyright strike. And that's a service they provide to fans, is legal help to sort of navigate those things when you want to make a case for fair use. They have some little boilerplate responses to YouTube takedown notices, but are just generally doing education on corporations might send you cease and desist. That was really big with some, like, sci-fi and fantasy authors would do that to fans who were writing fan fiction. But they were just doing it as an intimidation tactic. They didn't really have a legal leg to stand on. And so just educating fans that generally non-commercial work with a transformative element is totally fine in the US. And so that's been really helpful for me to know. And I think that informs a lot about my attitude towards what I do. But thank you, DVD person, for making that DVD. The care package with the little mini ponies in it was really sweet, and I was very excited to get it. So thank you very much. Anything else?
What do you think about a live-action human scale version of Detective Pony? Is it practical? Is it going to happen?
So I think first you need to own a horse farm or be good friends with someone who does. And I'm not sure that's out of reach of people in fandom, right? There are a lot of people. So if anyone does that, send me a link, because I would love to see it. I don't think it's out of reach, right? I think that stories which seem difficult just give more opportunity for creativity, right? Like, there are a lot of movie magic things you can do. We tell all sorts of stories in movies, and so I don't think this story would be impossible to tell with live action, right? Like if you wanted real horses, I think that would be amazing. I also think you could do stuff with pretend horses. Yeah, maybe people playing horses, or people in horse costumes, or a cardboard cutout of a horse. I don't know. Lots of options. So my alarm saying that we only had 10 minutes left to go has gone off. So I think I'm going to try to wrap up pretty soon because I want to give people at least 5 minutes to get to their next panel. So let's see. One thing I wanted to mention is I want to do some sort of giveaway. I have so much stuff left over from making Detective Pony. And in the before times, I was hoping to figure out a way I could offload some of the props, but that honestly does seem sort of hard. But so now I'm just thinking, if you send me your snail mail address, your mailing address, whether through a Twitter DM or you can email me at nakedbee@gmail.com or through a Tumblr ask, you can send it on anon so it's not connected. But if you send me a mailing address, I will put something in an envelope, probably a paper prop, because that means I can just stick the envelope in a mailbox and not have to do any package things. But if you send me a mailing address, I'll put some paper prop that was used in the movie into an envelope and I will mail that out. Feel free to ask for something specific if there's some aspect of the movie or character or scene that you really like. But it's also fine to just send the address and I will send you a mystery surprise. So even if you do ask for something specific, no promises, I'm just going to stick something in the mail. And I will eventually get around to sending you something, and that will help clear out the 6 plastic tubs of things, a lot of it paper, that I have. And also I promise to immediately forget your address and not do anything nefarious with it. And so that Tumblr on and on may be a convenient way. Oh. And so now it says 5 minutes left to go. So is there any last thing I should address? Or should we close up?
I think we're pretty well covered. We didn't get to all the questions, but I think aspects of them were covered.
Great. Okay. So yeah, I think that wraps it up for the stream. I'll be taking a short break and then heading back to check out the rest of Stuck at Home Con. Shout out to the folks who are making the con happen. I am so excited to get to be a part of this. And thank you guys all for coming to the panel. I really appreciate you taking the time to come listen to me talk. So thank you all for listening. I love you all. Have a good day.